Meanwhile, Eskom has downgraded load shedding from stage 2 to 1. According to a tweet by the power utility, stage 1 kicked off at midday and will continue until 10 p.m. The power utility had initially implemented stage 2 load shedding in efforts to replenish its emergency generation reserves. Eskom restarted rotational blackouts a week ago after breakdowns at 10 generation units at 7 power stations. It says the system remains unreliable and vulnerable, and people have been urged to use power sparingly. Now, load shedding expected to continue for several years as Eskom grapples with aging infrastructure and a legacy of neglect and mismanagement as the country grapples with a weakened economy further trained by the coronavirus. How will the escalation of load shedding affect South Africa's post-COVID-19 economic recovery? Joining me to talk about this is Energy Analyst Chris Yelland. Chris, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight. We saw the load shedding escalating quite rapidly in the past week. I mean, even reaching stage 4, about 10 power stations or 10 generating units at 7 power stations going down. Do you suspect it will go further than 18 months? There are those who are saying maybe 18 months is what we're going to have to live with. Is it going to be a little bit more than that?
Well, I think it's going to be continuing on and off intermittently, as we've seen in the last months. This is going to continue for the next 18 months or even longer. This is not me saying this. This is Eskom that is saying it. They're putting out clear messages that this is what we can expect in the months ahead. The point is that this emphasis on maintenance has been mentioned for a long time. But really is not the solution to the underlying problem. The best that we can hope for with this maintenance is to stabilize the energy availability factor at its current low levels. What is really needed is new generation capacity and fast.
Big shake-up happening at Eskom's generation. The former CEO at Eskom is gone, out of the way. Power station managers at Tutuga and Kindle Power Station have also been summarily dismissed, while others are pending some disciplinary inquiries. What do you make of those interventions, and why do you think those managers have been dismissed, and why do you think those suspensions are ensuing at this particular point?
Yeah, I think Eskom is starting to send out a strong signal that they're going to be demanding and expecting excellence from their power station managers. Power station managers at Eskom have been a long and outstanding problem at one stage. The significant majority of the power station managers were newly appointed in acting capacities. Really there has been, according to Eskom, an attitude of complacency and really not acting decisively on their portfolios. So it's sending a strong message to the public that they are taking action. It's also sending a strong signal to people within Eskom that they're going to be held accountable and that they're going to be demanded excellence. The thing is, the managers at Eskom are paid very, very handsomely. And therefore, Eskom is looking to expect excellence from its power station managers. And I think they have not been getting it up to now.
Now, lockdown put in South Africa to curb the spread of COVID-19 has, of course, had dire consequences on the economy. And we are now speaking of an economic recovery that will need to be powered to a degree by Eskom. Will it be able to do that?
Well, this is the catch-22 that Eskom finds itself in. Up to now, the load shedding has been relatively muted, even though this year is the worst on record, worse even than last year, which set new records. But because of the COVID-19 lockdown, demand was lower than expected. But we are seeing right now that as this lockdown eases, as demand for electricity picks up, electricity, which should be the grease that oils the wheels of the economy, is becoming the stumbling block for the economy. And as the demand for electricity picks up, Eskom is simply not in a position because of the declining performance of its plant that is aging, to meet this demand. This is going to really hold back the economy significantly. It already is holding the economy back.
So what's the bold step required here from government?
Yeah, so I think we've got to move beyond maintenance. Of course, maintenance is very important. Eskom has got to continue doing maintenance, but as I say, that's the best that can hope for, is just to stabilize the situation. The plant is getting older, and so we need to stabilize that situation. But really, the solution comes from new generation capacity. And we've seen already that the department has issued a request for proposals for new generation capacity, some 2,000 megawatts, but really this is really not enough, and it's not happening fast enough. It's quite clear, and it's been made clear by Eskom itself as well as by the CSIR, that what we really need right now is 6,000 megawatts in the next 2 to 3 years. And the only way that we can deliver this, because it cannot be delivered by traditional coal or nuclear or gas to power. It cannot even be delivered by renewable energy, wind and solar IPP projects. The solutions in the next 6 to 18 months are going to have to come from the customer itself. Customers are going to have to become part of the solution and are going to have to embark on self-generation to a very significant extent to take control of their own energy futures. The problem is that the regulatory process at the moment inhibits this. And so we have to move away these regulatory processes that are holding the process back.
Well, not only that, I mean, we are seeing 1 or 2 suburbs moving away from the grid, however, with some difficulty. It is a costly exercise, not something that many households can afford.
It's a very costly exercise to go completely off-grid, but it's not a costly exercise to supplement your grid needs with some own generation capacity, and therefore reduce the burden on Eskom and assist Eskom in meeting demand.
It's a catch-22 situation. Eskom actually needs to generate that amount of money. They need more customers. However, the solution that is suggested is, well, more customers need to move away from you, therefore pay you less. What's going to happen to the debt that Eskom already has, and that needs to be addressed?
Now, this points to the very deep structural problems within Eskom. As Eskom's prices increase dramatically year on year, so the business case for alternative generation, such as wind and solar PV backed up by battery energy storage, becomes better and better. Eskom has to really reinvent its business model. It's not business as usual. It needs to restructure. It needs to look at its cost structure. It needs to cut its cloth accordingly. And we need really a new generation capacity. And no matter what we say, this new generation capacity is not going to be able to come from Eskom because of its debt situation that you allude to.
Yeah. Now, Chris, there are those who are saying new generation capacity, it's not something that can happen tomorrow. It's something that probably is 3 to 5 years away because of the infrastructure that you need to put in place. Yes, you might have the electricity available at self-generation, but it can't be commissioned, it can't be plugged into the Eskom system.
Yeah, so the CSIR have recently announced a detailed study looking at the supply-demand situation in the next 5 years and where we find ourselves in this crisis. And they come up with a very practical 3-step plan. And I think this is what we've got to look at very seriously. So in step number 1 is the immediate short term between now and the next 18 months. And in this area, the only solutions that can be brought to bear in this time frame are self-generation in the form of solar PV plus battery energy storage. And this can be done quickly, it can be done cost-effectively, and it can be done in an environmentally compliant way. Step number 2 is the emergency procurement process that is currently underway by the Department of Energy, and this is intended to bring on an extra 2,000 megawatts. This has to be ramped up. And again, this cannot be delivered in 18 months to 2 years. And really, the time frame here we're looking at is 2 to 3 years. So that is step number 2. And then finally, step number 3 is the so-called second ministerial determination in terms of the integrated resource plan for electricity, which looks to wind plus solar PV plus battery storage plus gas to power. Utility scale installations that can be brought to bear in typically 2.5 to 3.5 years. And those are the solutions in the years ahead, and we need to really focus on these and accelerate them and stop dragging our feet and being bogged down by bureaucracy. But step 1 is the immediate step that can be resolved not at the cost of government, but at customers' cost quickly, simply by removing bureaucratic red tape.
Talk to me a little bit more, Chris, about this emergency power procurement program. What options does government have there? There are those who are saying there are these massive ships on the ocean that can come into South Africa, and we can plug into them and they can generate electricity for us. What are the options that they have?
Yeah, the whole question of power ships, there's a lot of misinformation coming out, a lot of propaganda, and a lot of snake oil salesmen. To be honest, power ships are not a low-cost option. In fact, a very expensive option because they burn either diesel or heavy fuel oil or gas to power, which has to be imported. And also, they do not come in very large sizes, so you need a lot of them. It's difficult to connect them to the grid, and they are very environmentally unfriendly. In other words, they cause a lot of pollution. And you must remember the pollution that is generated is not at high chimney stacks, it's at sea level, and they are certainly not environmentally compliant. So they have one advantage, they can be delivered quickly, but the disadvantages are the cost and the pollution, and frankly, they are not a solution for powering a country. There is a place for power ships. The place is in emergency situations where there may be a war situation at a coastal city, an earthquake at a coastal city, where you need emergency power to power essential services. It is not a solution for supplying a large city like Cape Town or Durban on a continuous basis. It's simply way too expensive.